People don't just drop dead. God doesn't go, well, off you go and you're dead because you're not following my word. It's our choice. Everything within the Torah, everything, can be interpreted in 4 ways, and the deepest way is the most spiritual, Kabbalistic way. All the stories, all the narratives, all the laws can be presented as stories and laws, or they can have a far deeper meaning. And I'm going to give you an example of that today. So when the Jewish people were gathered around Har Sinai, around Mount Sinai, there were a number of miracles that took place even before the Ten Commandment announcement and even before they received the whole Torah. There was a cloud that would travel with them. It was called the Shekhinah, the clouds of glory. And it was a presence that was always there, a physical presence that would remind the people that Hashem was always there. And this cloud slowly came down and rested at the top of the mountain. And when it did, a desert mountain began to bloom, and flowers and trees grew. And suddenly from a brown, orangey, sandy desert mountain, a beautiful, beautiful oasis was formed. But what actually happened was when Moses came down and the Jewish people were about to move on from the mountain and the Shekhinah lifted, immediately everything that had grown on the mountain died and withered away. We don't know where Har Sinai was. We don't have an exact recording, and it seems to have not been important to the people at all, nor to the Torah to actually bother recording where was this monumental incident of the Jewish people receiving the Torah. Where did it take place? And the fact that it's not recorded and the fact that the plants did not survive are such a crucial lesson and a way to understand this whole narrative. It was no big kunst that anything grew. To us, it's a big thing. Plants grow in the desert. It's so unnatural. It's so unexpected. That's amazing. But when we're talking about the Creator resting, so to speak, and bringing a physical presence onto a mountain, if plants grow, well, that's obvious. Because if the Creator is the constant giver of life and provider of energy to all things physical in the whole universe, well, of course, if there's an intense presence there, greater things are going to bloom and blossom. Hashem didn't consider this amazing, and it seems that even the Jewish people weren't so impressed because it was obvious that that would happen. What would be impressive would be if people struggled to create a desert mountain to bloom. And when we look at it in our lives, when people do make the desert bloom, when people do take seeming rubbish and create beauty out of it, that's amazing. And so this actually helps us understand what is the purpose of the Torah. This world is a very, very physical place. It's a desert. It seemingly lacks all spiritual awareness. It's very hard to look at something physical and see the soul within it. It's very hard to focus on the spirituality of life because of the pressures of life that keep us trapped and focused on the two-dimension that is the world. Moses went up and he got the Torah. And the Torah, as I said yesterday, to many people is a set of laws. And it's a set of stories. But it's actually more than that. The stories are all lessons. The Torah is a very inaccurate history book. It doesn't give us exact dates. It doesn't give us locations. Numbers are sometimes just rounded up to the nearest 100 or 1,000. It seems that the facts were not important in the recording of the stories, but rather the lessons of the stories. And therefore, we don't get a chronological sequence to the stories in the Torah. We get things in order according to their lesson. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are characters that teach us a lesson. They lived, and their lives are what's important. What they did, who they were as people, what they represented spiritually, and how they were conscious of that. That's what's important. What they ate for breakfast every day is not important. The Torah says there is no lesson required to be brought out of their breakfast, and therefore the Torah doesn't record their breakfast. The only time the Torah does bring up what they ate was to teach us something very, very important. And same with the laws. The laws are not just there to govern people. We could have made our own legal system. The laws are so much more. I said yesterday, and I'm going to focus on it today, a law is a mitzvah, but a mitzvah is not a law. Mitzvah is a commandment, but it's so much more than that. Mitzvah is from the same root, as I said yesterday, as tzavta, chibur, connection. And so the Kabbalah really harps, and Chassidut really takes this apart, how the connection is what really a mitzvah is. To be able to take a physically mundane, seemingly superficial object and inject it with spirituality and connect with the soul, that is what the purpose of a mitzvah is. 613 methods of connection. So Hashem made the mountain bloom. Big whoop. The question is, how do we make the mountain bloom? We make the mountain bloom in a very interesting way. Hashem said to Moshe, and Hashem said to the people on that day, I'm going to give you modalities for how you can make your desert bloom. The world is a desert meaning it is bereft of life. It has very, very little. It's very extreme in its natural environment. It's very hard. But I want you to make your desert bloom. And I want you to do it by choice. And therefore, if you don't do it, nothing really happens. Look at this world. There are plenty of people who don't practice spirituality. There are many people that don't practice religion. And the world is what it is. People don't just drop dead. God doesn't go, well, off you go and you're dead because you're not following my word. It's our choice. We as human beings choose what we do. So we made a choice that day. When we said Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen, that was a choice, that we will take on these 613 methods of connection with the physical and spiritual. And what we do is now we try to find the spirituality in everything. And every time we do connect, and every time we do take something physical, and we intentionally use it for something positive. Every time we don't make a blessing, we're not blessing food. Every time we focus our mind through making a simple statement and recognizing the spirituality of food, I take it in and I use it with purpose. What will I do with the energy? And no longer was that a steak or a salad. It actually is a form of energy which will propel me going forward, giving me more life so that I can achieve more for the world, for the spiritual existence of this universe. That's what happened on Shavuot, and that's what the giving of the Torah is. It's our ability to make our desert bloom. Now you say, but we live in a desert, and that was one mountain, and that one mountain is actually what Hashem wanted. Hashem didn't make the whole desert bloom. He made the one mountain bloom. We can't make, as individuals, we can't make the whole desert bloom. We can make our section of the desert bloom. Not everyone else in the world is going to join us. We see there's so much death, there's so much violence, there's so much hate in this world. But don't let that bog you down in a way that highlights the uniqueness and how special our hard work is. Part of what makes a mountain filled with flowers and trees in a desert so beautiful is the fact that it's surrounded by such stark, empty, orange space. But everyone then says that mountain's so beautiful. And the other mountains want to be mountains just like that. And so another person with that innate spiritual artist self comes along and says, I can create something just like that mountain. And the fever spreads. And what actually happens is there's a critical mass. And that critical mass was just like the Jewish people went through the desert. And eventually they'd come to the land of Israel, which they'd call home. And they'd make it bloom. The world is heading in that direction. Our goal is to make our desert bloom and do what we can and inspire others to do what they can and slowly let the ripple effect go. But there's one more aspect of Shavuot that is so important that we spiritually understand its importance. Because what I've said is all good and true. But the question is, where do we begin? How do I do that? Okay, great, Menachem. I'm going to be spiritual. But what does that mean? Before Moses went up on the mountain, the people were told to separate from each other. For 3 days, husbands and wives moved out of each other's tents. They left their physical relationship. They left their comfort zone. And they went to be on their own. They went to be by themselves for 3 days to get into a state where they would be ready for the receiving of the Torah. It's perfectly normal and it's correct that human beings want to be with other human beings. We want a life partner. We want a spouse. We want someone who we will live with and share with and receive from and be able to give to. That is in our DNA. And that's what human beings were created to do. Procreate, continue existence, provide life to this world. But Hashem said, I need you to separate because I don't want you just to have a physical relationship where your emotional and physical needs are being met. I want you to have a spiritual relationship. And what is so important in our life is that we do take me time. We do take time off and block out the world. No bills, no phone, no emails, no internet. And however often you do this, some people do it every week. It's called Shabbat. But even more than Shabbat is to be able to just leave the family, leave everything, change of pace, change of environment, go overseas, go to the country, go to a park, somewhere different that you can start thinking about, well, why do I exist? Why do I live? What's about to happen in my life and what am I going to do about it so that I can own the situation, so that I can provide as opposed to just respond? And the Jewish people had to separate for 3 days, focusing on what was about to happen, preparing themselves spiritually, meditation, introspection, awareness. And then they have the Sinai experience and they see that the mountain can bloom and they receive 613 methods of connection with the physical world, and then they all return back into their human relations with another physical person. But the difference is they've both been enriched, and no longer are they just a couple, no longer are they just a family, but they are a family with a common goal of making this world a more beautiful spiritual place. No longer is it just about, I need you and you need me, let's be together, I feel love. But as I feel love and I feel that we can achieve so much together, and that us being together is an achievement in its own spiritual right. So that's what Shavuot is. Take some time off leading into Shavuot, which is next week. Spend time on your own, understanding your purpose of existence. Focus on what the Torah wants, which is a spiritual reality. Reframe Judaism, reframe religion, reframe mitzvot as being a spiritual way of life, a spiritual contribution with this world, where the focus is the other. The focus is how can I help the world? How can I help my relationship? How can I help another person? And then in turn, we will make our desert mountains bloom.
If you like that video, hit the subscribe button and notification bell below for hours of the best Jewish content online.